Welcome to Pitch It To Me podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of Flesh and Blood design. Surely this Light Warrior Majestic will be the one that fixes Bolton. Today's episode will be about the Kayo Armory Deck and preconstructed decks. On Red Pitch, Fuzzy will outline what makes a good product for new players. On Yellow Pitch, Joel will talk us through the impact of printing powerful cards and supplemental products. And on Blue Pitch, Clark will get us excited for the potential future of new product releases. You can find us across all socials such as TikTok and Instagram at Pitch To Me Podcast.
I'm Clark.
I'm Joel.
And I'm Fuzzy.
Dude, did you guys see those new spoilers?
Fuck yes, dude. Man, I was just like, Levi's tiring. I'm feeling like I'm hitting a wall. I think I'm going to get off Levia, and then just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
You son of a bitch. I'm in.
Yeah, it kind of makes me want to be a shadow player.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, baby.
I mean, there is a Shadow Runeblade, if you didn't know that, Fuzzy.
Yeah, that is true.
And,
you have played Runeblade in the past.
Mm-hmm. And that new Eloquence generator looks pretty sweet.
It actually kind of makes me excited. I hope they actually end up like printing Eloquence in Mistveil.
Mm-hmm.
One, because I think it could actually be nice for illusionists.
For sure.
And then two, because I don't know, it's just it would be nice to be able to have the token that the card wants in the pack for it, right? Mm-hmm. So if this is someone's first pack, it's not like they need to like go try to hunt down an Eloquence token from Dusk to Dawn.
Right.
Like it's going to be in that pack.
Yeah, I think that would be cool too. And I think that's a good take. Like if I can't remember if there's any examples of cards that have tokens on like an expansion slot card that weren't also included in the main set. Maybe that's kind of a stupid take, and there definitely is one, but I just can't think of it.
If someone's yelling at the screen, they should really leave a comment about it.
Yeah. A comment or join the Discord and yell at me,
Yeah, yell at us there.
Yeah. And literally maybe 2 hours before we met to record, 2 more spoilers came out.
Ooh.
And actually adds a lot to this episode too that we're going to be talking about, but they added some really sick Bolton cards. A new D-React that basically functions like a soul shield, but like way better, I think, ? And a really great pair of new boots for Bolton as well. So if you haven't seen it, join our Discord. Don't join any others. Join ours because we have a spoiler feed. And check them out because they look really sweet. I'm excited about it.
That's really what sets our Discord apart is our spoiler feed.
Yeah, you can't find it anywhere else. Join ours.
Nowhere else.
Yep. We're the only Discord with a spoiler feed. I think it's cool that the next Armory deck is going to be Bolton. I was not expecting that. You know?
I actually kind of like it because every so often I'll be on like the subreddit for Flesh and Blood. There's technically 2 of them. But I'll
They actually merged.
Oh, did they? Good for them. And every so often someone will just be like, hey, what starter deck should I pick up? Or, I got these Monarch starter decks. Like, what do I do with the Bolton one? And I'm like, you don't play it.
Yeah.
It is garbage. It nearly got me off the game.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. I was gonna ask you about your experience again with, how you got into the game. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Ultimately, we are doing an episode all about the upcoming Armory decks, First Strike decks, and any other future product releases. We're thinking back on those classic battles, Rhinar and versus Dorinthia. We're thinking about Round the Table. These have been exciting, interesting product releases that LSS has had, I think, varied responses to.
Yes.
And so there really is a lot to talk about. Plus, all the conversation right now is kind of about one card.
Yeah.
Yeah. But basically, this episode is about everything that's not a main expansion set in Flesh and Blood, which so far has really only been pre-constructed decks. So this is going to feel like the episode is about precon decks.
Mm-hmm. So with all that being said, I think we should go ahead and jump into Red Pitch. Fuzzy, take it away.
So I think many of the ancillary products that LSS publishes are really geared for the new player experience to get other people into the game, right? And I want to talk about what I think makes a good new player product. And we can talk about whether we think the things that already exist in the game hit those points and really make it easy for new players to join the game and participate. So the first one I wrote down is ease of access. And this has two parts. First of all, you want your new player product to be in their face, right? Imagine you're going to the grocery store and there's the candy right before you check out. It's like so hard not to buy that candy bar because it's right there. It's ease of access.
Yep.
And having blitz decks like at armories all the time that are right there, partly because no one else wants them, that actually adds to the ease of access. The fact that they're only bought by new players, but you could just pick one up, like it serves as a little ad for the game and you can like see what cards are in the deck and start playing immediately. And the other one would be like price. If you want new players to get into the game, you want it to be really easy. You don't want them to have to invest a lot of money. You can just like pop $10 on a blitz deck and start playing the game. Do you guys feel like LSS has good ease of access ways to engage with the game right now?
Yeah, I mean, the very first time I was introduced to the game, I also encountered these blitz decks, and it was funny because I never actually played with it until I got back to the States. Like, I just opened it and I was looking at the cards and studying on my player at home. But reading like the descriptions on the back, looking at the art of the heroes, and I was talking to the cashier at the front and some of the people that were playing in person, like about the different decks, like what they're about. And that was like my first exposure to, number one, the community, and number two, like what the philosophy of the game is and how it relates to my previous experience in TCGs, or just intriguing a part of me that loves fantasy in general. So I think it's a really great like gateway drug.
Yeah. I definitely think so. I think it's been a little hit or miss in terms of availability. One, because I think that LGSs, because that's one of the interesting things, is like if you want it available and in new players' faces, then you need to have it in places where you will find new players.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that Flesh and Blood actually struggles with. Flesh and Blood is a wonderful game, but it's not quite a Titan yet. And like, while I've started to see like Digimon TCG and like One Piece TCG and Naruto TCG in like big box stores, I don't see Flesh and Blood getting there quite yet.
Right.
And so I think they're actually missing out.
Like Target, Walmart?
Yes, Target and Walmart. So I think they're missing out on like grabbing new players that way.
Sure.
But I think that's just an issue of like, look, they're their own IP and you can't really expect them to have the same kind of negotiating power as these other properties, TCGs.
Absolutely.
That's fair. If they were a little bigger, they'd be able to reach a wider market and be able to get more new players into the game.
I'd also say that LGSs don't really want to invest in a lot of the Blitz decks because how many new players do they really have coming through buying those decks?
For sure.
They always want to have the most up-to-date one, but then they're always going to have these leftover ones. I know at a lot of the LGSs that we go to, there's at least like a dozen Monarch starter decks, if not more.
And the Monarch has some weird Blitz precons that are, for other reasons that we're probably going to talk about, not the best way to get introduced to the game.
Yeah, so because they're being sold in such large packages, I feel like LGSs don't quite want to invest in them, but they feel like they have to because they want to support the game. And I think that's not a recipe for success. You're right, it means that it's really available, but it's also kind of not, because eventually some LGSs are going to make the decision of it's not financially viable if I only have 5 new players come in a year to buy 36 starter decks.
Well, I also think like it's on the onus, not the onus, but it's also the entrenched players or the enfranchised players that buy these decks and introduce their friends to it. Like my brother and his friends, they all play Magic the Gathering. They're pretty into it now. But, you know, slowly I want to get them into like the better, superior TCG.
Right.
And so my first instinct is to like get them Blitz decks and then upgrade from there. So that's kind of a plus that I see with these Blitz decks. And they're so like key to Flesh and Blood, I think. I think that's how a lot of us started. And I would like to keep seeing them every set, like continue with these alongside the, you know, this Armory deck.
Another metric for whether a product is good for new players would be how easy it is to play, right? If they don't know a lot about the game, you don't want to dump a really complex strategy on new players. Although notably, Brian Go, when we had the privilege of seeing him talk at the Q&A, mentioned that you do want to have a variety of complexity in new player experiences, because there are lots of new players that want to sit down and have a really chewy, complicated like deck and get used to the game that way. But in general, you want the game to be approachable, right? And intuitive. So a lot of new player products are probably going to have simpler decks to get you into the game. Like if you sit down and you're trying to recommend a hero to a new player, like I'm sure you all have your list. I think like Dash and Bravo come to mind. Like neither of those are super complex heroes, but they also have a lot to learn along the way, right?
Yeah. Iroh was also definitely that for a very long time.
Or Fi.
Fi even still has some instant stuff that's messy.
I think the next thing you'd want, and this kind of goes opposite to my last point, is teachable moments. That there's enough in the deck for you to have those little points of learning along the way, where you realize, oh, if I do things this way, I can do X, Y, Z, where you can unlock the power of your deck and give your player opportunities to grow. That's something that I would want to see in something designed for a new player to experience.
Yeah, I think Ninja and Warrior exemplify this really well. Ninja specifically with the sequencing of your attacks, because a lot of them care about this combo keyword. And Warrior, you kind of want to hold your cards and find the exact right moment to play them. And so those can be like pretty punishing mistakes, but you'll learn very quickly like how to play those decks correctly.
Yeah. Or the importance of blocking, the importance of arsenaling. I know that when I had the lucky opportunity to teach some brand new people the game with the Iroh starter deck, you know, they were saying like great lessons that I still need to remember when I'm playing at Armory.
Yeah,
so, like,
absolutely.
They were like, man, I arsenaled this card, but it was really hard to get it out of my arsenal. And I'm like, damn, you're right.
I literally lost a game the other day. Did the exact same thing. You also want your decks to be fun, right?
Yeah.
Objectively, yeah.
You'd hope that like you're trying to draw these new players in with something that's fun and engaging and make them think, oh man, I want to do this more often.
That also has a lot to do with like the flavor of these heroes too, and like the experience of it all, and much less about the mechanics. Because a new player just isn't going to appreciate the mechanical beauty of Flesh and Blood until very later on.
Yeah, like I like fatigue as a concept. I've come to appreciate how blocking can be really different than the traditional aggro strategy and what it takes to fatigue someone out. But I wouldn't want to sit a new player down with a deck and be like, the way that you're going to win is you block until you win. Like that doesn't sound fun to a new player, right? Yeah. I think like it could. There are lots of people who have fun with fatigue though.
Yep.
But the average person, you're not going to draw them in with something like a defensive strategy, probably.
Man, for these past couple of points, I'm just thinking back to that moment that I first came over to Fuzzy's house and everyone was playing. You know, Han had his very first little dash list. Everyone's playing their little decks, and I got handed the Bolton starter deck, and it failed on every single one of them. Like it wasn't easy for me to play because I was like, okay, so to play a card, I need resources. And it's like, yes, and a card in hand to charge. And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, but not always. And I was like, oh, okay. So if I have the card, okay. And then it was like, right. But then, once I block with this specific type of card, then something happens. Then you can do this other thing, to then do this other thing, and then do this other thing. And I'm looking at, like, my weapons, and it's like, oh, I want to swing one weapon, then the other. How do I get that? Oh, I need to pump its power. But I can't pump its power until I swing with the... Wait a minute, how is this deck supposed to work? And then the entire time I'm playing against a chain starter deck.
Yeah.
Which, like...
Oh my god. I remember, like, I was into the game for, like, a couple months. I was playing Katsu Blitz. I kept losing to Talon's chain precon. And I'm like, Talon doesn't play this game. He only plays this game with me. I've been going to armories. Why can't I beat this chain precon?
It was so much stronger. And then even against like the Bolton matchup, like they had non-attack action cards to block me.
Yep.
So it didn't. So I was like, oh, you blocked me. I get plus power. It's like, no. Read this tiny little thing at the bottom of my card. And then even on top of all of that, the correct way to win that matchup was just to block them.
Dash is boring like that.
which like is not what I want to be doing when I first play the game. I want to do the cool fun stuff, not block the chain until they fatigue themselves. Like it just failed on every single one of these markers.
True.
Don't buy the Bolton starter deck.
Buy anything else.
Any other starter deck.
Maybe not Levia either.
No, don't do that.
No, Levia's fine.
Okay, the other thing I want to bring up, competitive viability. So this one's a little bit more shaky. I feel like this one's maybe the least important out of the ones I mentioned so far. But when you set a new player up, you'd hope that you're setting them up with a deck that is strong enough that they can play with other players and win and succeed, right? And that really goes into my last point, that if you give a new player a deck and they're not winning at all with it, they're probably not having that much fun.
Yeah.
And that's a really shaky, like, slippery slope to go down because it's really hard for LSS to print competitively viable stuff. It's not necessarily the job of the company to decide what's the strongest strategies.
Right.
You know, that's really something that like the player community, like that's part of being a player is like figuring out what the best strategies are.
Right.
So there's definitely a weird like catch-22 there, but also you can tell when a deck is crap and not worth buying, even for somebody who's never played the game before, right? Another thing you'd want to do in order to set a player up to launch their Flesh and Blood career is you would hope that their deck has a lot of cards that can still be played in other contexts.
Yeah.
Like, if I give a player a deck, lots of commons in Flesh and Blood are playable. Like, they might not have the legendaries and the majestics they need, but if the core of their deck has some, like, meat to it, then they can use that core and slowly buy upgrades. They can, it gives them a more reasonable path that they can follow to get to being a more enfranchised player.
Yeah.
Give them a ladder to climb.
So now can we talk about like how the Kayo Armory deck? Because I feel like the past 2 points that you brought up here, Fuzzy, the starter decks did not do that well at all.
Yeah.
But these Armory decks are supposed to do these final 2 points a lot better.
That's what I was expecting for sure.
And we've seen the deck list does it.
Well, sort of. I was actually expecting more staple pieces in the deck.
Yeah.
Lots of the cards in that deck are just commons, you know? Even if they were like common staples, like Savage Feast is a good card. I can kind of see why they didn't want to print a card like Savage Feast in the KO deck, because that would be like, maybe it would surprise new players when they realize that they can't quite do what they want Savage Feast to do. Bear Fangs is good. Pulping is good. It's cool that Savage Beatdown is in the deck. That's pretty cool. But I think I was just expecting a little bit more strength.
I think everyone, there was definitely people who were like, they're going to reprint Command and Conquer and like Scowling Flesh Bag.
Well, to be fair, every set, people are like, oh yeah, they're for sure reprinting Command and Conquer.
True.
This is
people do mention that literally every single time, except round the table. I don't think I heard a single muttering of CNC being in round the table.
That exception almost like defines the rule there.
I know, right? I also do want to mention that this could possibly give us some insights into what LSS considers the Armory level to be.
Sure.
If they were like, this is an Armory deck, then that's what they're saying they think Armories are. They think Armories is this KO list, which is probably not a bad KO list. It looks very, very strong.
They could probably still win for sure.
Could probably still win a couple games at an Armory.
Yeah.
I don't think this could take an Armory, at least not the Armories that we're going to.
Yeah, but this also, Clark, I've heard you mention this before in previous episodes where you wanted Armories to be a place that's more approachable. And, you know, that the change with the whole XP thing and qualification to larger tournaments kind of pushed the Armories into that right direction. I think this product is also an extension of that promise, like, hey, we're going to bring Armories back in a more casual light.
Yes.
I'm sure Armory Deck KO is a fine new player product. Maybe a little bit pricey. I don't think this is necessarily designed exactly for new players. Maybe as like people who have been playing Blitz for a while and are ready to step up to CC. Like it's not the first rung on the ladder, but maybe the second or third. Maybe they were just on purpose trying not to print any cards that don't have 6 power with KO's ability. Like there's 0 that I'm seeing in the deck list. So no blood rush bellows.
Yeah. No misses at all. Sure, but like, I think what you were saying, Fuzzy, of like seeing a bit more staples, like, where's the beast withins?
Yeah. But I don't want to complain too much about the armory deck, at least not right now. And before I move on, I want you to think as a player about how you can use these tricks and metrics, not just as a way of evaluating the products that LSS prints, but also as ways that you can get other players playing the game. Anthony Pham, when he came on our podcast a few episodes ago,
Almost half the lifespan of this podcast. It was episode 20.
Well, to be fair, a few is a broad definition.
like he talked about working at Kingslayer Games and how they put together decks from the store's collection in order to be given out to new players. Like they're basically creating their own new player experience. And you want to think about like what that means to foster new players and getting them into the game. Do you guys think I'm missing anything? You want your decks to have ease of access, ease of play, teachable moments. You want them to be fun, potentially competitive, and you want them to be able to use that deck in order to springboard into a higher power deck in the future.
Yeah, I would say just steer people away from Leviat and Bolton in general. That's usually my go-to.
Well, like, let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, what specifically do you think detracts those two heroes from the new player experience?
So I'd say that complexity is like probably one thing, but then I think we've also almost seen the opposite, where we saw a high degree of complexity in the illusionist class bring in a ton of new players who are pretty much only illusionist players. Like that class just attracts a completely different breed of flesh and blood player. And that's not me like trying to really set them apart. That's me trying to say like, I don't think it's always complexity. I think it's how much do you fight against the deck on those two heroes specifically. But it all kind of wraps into I can win games. You need to be able to print a deck, but then you also need to be able to set them against other decks of a similar level. I think that's ultimately kind of like the weirdest thing about the KO deck. Because the KO deck is saying, you can play this at your armory. And if someone sits down across the table from me with that KO deck, I'm going to run them over. Not just because I'm a better player, but because my list is so much stronger. I think it's going to become more important in the future that when we go to armories, we'll be playing one deck. Probably the deck that like we're testing or we're practicing for a tournament. And then we're going to sit across the new player. And we are going to put that deck away. And we are going to pull out a deck that is actually closer to what they are playing so that they do have the chance to win.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they can't be printing competitive level things, but that's what's being played at a lot of armories.
Yeah.
It's competitive tier and right below competitive tier. So like, I think that they're never really going to be able to do that in a product. It's going to be on the community to make the adjustments.
True.
In order to really bring in those new players in those ways.
That's such a good distinction for like what we can expect out of products from LSS and like what we actually need to do to make it like work.
Yes.
That's a great point. To paraphrase, you could say it's not about the products. It's about the culture and the environment that the players
It's
play
about
in.
both. I think like if they show up with a Bolton starter deck, I'm going to very gently take it from them, give them $20, and we'll go buy another deck. Hey, let's get you something else there, buddy.
And that's it.
Cool.
Joel, why don't you talk to us about the other big thing that people are thinking about with this KO Armory deck?
I'll do just that. So I want to talk a little bit about the power discrepancy between the different pre-constructed decks that we've seen come out of LSS in the past few years. To start off, I just kind of wanted to highlight like how interesting it is to see like the balance between accessibility, power, and the rest of the deck essentially. Like I think of, and I'm thinking here about Glistening Steelblade versus Visit the Blacksmith, which if you don't remember, I'm not going to fault you for it.
I don't remember Visit the Blacksmith at all.
It's a blue pitch, generic, 0 cost, non-attack action with 2 block. And it says your next sword attack this turn gets +1.
Oh, yeah, +1 on my sword.
Yeah. Because
2 block?
2 block. Because the world really needed that.
Do you think they're ever going to print 1 blocks?
So Visit the Blacksmith, and then the rest of like Rhino's reprints, like I felt like the power disparity in the classic battles deck was pretty strange. And we also noticed that there was like a limited quantity. Like it was really hard to get your hands on these classic battles, and you needed 3 copies of the classic battles because you only got 1 glistening steel blade per deck.
Yeah, everyone's searching for their glistening steel blades. You only get 1 per copy of classic battles.
And it's like 90% of the cost. I think they're still sitting at like $35 or something like that.
Yeah,
So-
they are money.
Yeah, and for no reason, because glistening is objectively like not that strong because it's specifically like for Dawnblade builds, and even though it's not that strong, it still remains a very expensive card.
It's like strong
because-
enough.
Yeah, it's like strong enough, but it's like still expensive. So like no one really has, like, unless you already were a warrior player and you bought it right at the start, like I think people are really turned off when they find out, oh, I can only get this card if I buy 3 sealed decks. You know what I mean? It just feels really weird.
I mean, we know that for a fact because we had a friend fairly recently build Dorinthia as like his first big CC deck.
Right.
And he was like, I have to go buy 3 of these things?
Yeah.
And then he saw the price and he was like, Jesus, I don't want to do that.
I wouldn't blame him because it's just an absurd way to like print a new product. But I think they learned the lesson, and not only in terms of how much they're printing for these power cards, but the power increase in general. And I'm talking about the power increase from like the Rhino versus Dorinthia deck to the Kayo Armory deck, and mostly because I think Savage Sash and Strength Rules All especially are very strong. They basically function as a brute CNC and like a hardened cross trap. That would probably be the best use case for it, right?
In terms of what
Savage
the
Sash?
deck is doing, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of what it can do, no.
Right.
But in terms of what it's doing in that deck, it's like a heart and cross.
And, yeah, and
that can block.
I think it is strong because of that, because it has the versatility of being able to say, okay, I'm gonna block a little bit, do what I was normally gonna do, but with less cards because it costs less, or just have an explosive combo turn. And even with this power increase, there's still like weak reprints, but it still includes a lot more than the dual decks did, because you get like Savage Beatdown, which is another Majestic, and you theoretically get 3 of them.
Being able to have play sets of everything does make the deck like really consistent, and it's a favor to the secondary market.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So now you're not forced to pay $90 for your playset of Strength Rules Them All, and then you have like 2 extra Savage Sashes. Like, I think they did a better job future-proofing this product than they did with the classic battles. But I also wanted to highlight that even though this is an armory level deck, it doesn't include a sideboard, which is very, very core to Flesh and Blood, especially if you're going to be playing in an armory.
Any amount of arcane and this KO deck literally just folds. So
Yeah.
like if anyone takes this to an actual armory, they're just gonna fucking lose the second that they sit down across a Vinset, Viserai, or Kano.
And all of those are seeing like a really big bump in popularity, which is hard to predict, I will say, on LSS's part. Like maybe they would have if they knew that these decks were going to be much stronger. But I just think like there was potential for there to like reprint all of the Null Rune pieces, maybe in different art. Add more utility cards like Time Snap Potions or extra poppers, whatever.
Man.
Or
I'm
even,
just... actually, I love that you just said that. And I want to take a moment on it. Class-specific Null Rune.
yeah, like if
Like, oh god, that'd be so cool.
exactly, or even if they just reprinted Skullhorn, because that's from Crucible of War. That's kind of a hard set to come across now. So these things I was just thinking of when talking about like the competitive viability with these armory decks, and just something that they could potentially work on as they want to like curate their product a little bit more to specific like demographics of their player base. And then like I said, literally like 2 hours ago, the Bolton Armory deck was spoiled with the new D-React and the new whatchamacallit, the new Light Warrior boots, which look really cool. And based on what we see in the KO deck, we're probably going to get 3 new cards for Bolton as well.
Probably like 1 equipment and then 2 like Majestic cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Run Roughshod was the other brand new card that was introduced. It was a 1-for-5 brute card,
But that was
that you can only play if you've discarded a card.
that was a common though, right?
I believe it's technically at rare.
Oh,
But
okay.
whether it's common or rare, this is the only time it's been printed, and it's color locked at blue.
Got it.
So, yeah, if you're thinking, okay, well, Bolton needs something, they got the Majestic Defense Reaction. They have a Majestic Equipment piece. So, what else can we expect? We can expect one more Majestic Equipment piece if we're matching, because technically the KO deck got printed with 2. Everyone just forgot about Hide Tanner because it's...
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah,
Everyone just kind of forgot about that
I mean, that's
card.
basically like a Goliath gauntlet that blocks.
Yeah.
I really like that card, and I did completely forget about that card.
Actually, you're right. It's a Goliath Gauntlet that blocks. It's a great card.
Yeah.
My combo Blitz KO list is getting better by the second.
Oh yeah, I could see it. So there's definitely some more room for Bolton to like get like really good cards, and I think we will see like how much they want to buff the heroes that get these armory decks. But I was thinking to myself, like, with the amount of cards that we're getting from this deck, it kind of seems like it's like a paid expansion slot. Like we basically are paying money for an extra supplemental set. And I was thinking to myself, like, shouldn't we be getting more if we're going to be paying like $30-$40 for these decks? Like it just doesn't seem like a lot to me.
Yeah, it really just depends on why you're purchasing it, right?
Sure.
Like, for a new player, I've heard this from new players, like, as enfranchised players, we look at Blitz Precons and we say, why would I ever buy that?
Right.
And then we don't think about, like, the empathy or it takes to be like, why would anyone buy that? You know, we think that because it's not something that gives us any value when we buy it, that other people shouldn't buy it too. And part of that is looking out for newer players, right? Like, oh, don't buy that precon. You're paying $10 for a bunch of commons that aren't worth anything. And like, well, what they're buying is not cardboard. They're buying an experience. And with this KO deck, you're not just trying to pay $40 to get $40 worth of cards. You're paying $40 so you can play in an armory without work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone has already done the deck building and the like putting everything together for you.
So I don't have to go run around putting my deck list
Yeah.
together. It's the ease of access that you're paying for. That's kind of like, I think, why it's okay for them to have just a few nuggets here. And honestly, those nuggets make it appealing to an enfranchised player. It makes people want to buy this product for a completely different reason than what I think this armory deck is supposed to do. In a way, I actually think it's counterproductive to the goal of this armory deck. So if you're a local game store owner and you get this shipment of armory decks and you're super excited to introduce Blitz players to this new CC format, especially because that's the premier format of the game, right? But all of your armory decks are bought out by enfranchised players who already play CC, who just want to get their flashy copies of these new promo cards or their Savage Sash or what have you, then suddenly the armory deck is not doing what it was intended to do.
So with that being said, I want to go to my last point of the pitch and just highlight that Savage Sash is really strong. Like, what if it gets banned? You know what I mean? Fuzzy and I were talking a little bit about like the implications of what it means to ban a card that's in a pre-constructed deck. It's happened a few times in Magic the Gathering, to my understanding, and the way that they dealt with that was a little interesting. Fuzzy, you said that basically the way to get around it was if you were to play this specific card, you have to play the pre-constructed deck to the T in order to use it.
Yeah, like imagine you're Wizards of the Coast. You just printed this deck that's meant to be played at a semi-competitive level. This was in 2011. It was like Jace the Mind Sculpture and Stoneforge Mystic got banned. If you don't know what those cards do, that's okay. They were strong enough to be banned, and they were strong enough to get printed in this pre-constructed deck. So what do you do if you're trying to sell this deck to players, but also the deck has cards that are banned for your game? What they did was they said, if you buy this deck and you play with this exact deck list, you can still play the cards in your constructed format. It would be as if like Savage Sash gets banned in this game, Flesh and Blood, but you can only play with it if you're playing the Kayo Armory deck, which sounds jank, right? It gets awkward when LSS is printing decks for something but they also ban cards for that thing, for that deck. Like, and Savage Sash is strong enough that it might see bans. It's really hard to tell right now because the card hasn't even been released, you know?
Yeah, I posed the question, but I'm going to immediately backtrack and do a 180. Because I want to highlight that KO was really strong out the gate. Like, people were talking about how oppressive he was, how strong he was, and he is. And I'm wondering, will the strength of Savage Sash plus Brute eventually peter out, much like KO did on release?
Certainly possible. But in general, with these decks, if they're going to print new cards, they run that risk with every card they print, which is why in general, you see these cards being not very strong. In the round the table decks, lots of those Bard cards were just okay. None of them were about to hit bans anytime soon. Civic Steps is okay. It happens to be best in slot, but not because it's an amazing card. And those feel safer to me, you know? I think as a game designer, you would try to be safe when you're designing these new cards outside of a main expansion set.
Yeah, I just really think that, like, the more new cards they print, the riskier the product becomes.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I would really like to see LSS become more conservative in their approach to it.
Yeah. Because ultimately, like, if a product catches a ban at all, I don't think there's a feasible way that would be received well that could, like, help this product recover. And as a result, I think you mentioned this best, Fuzzy, it kind of affects the trust that we have in these products in the future and our trust in LSS and how they design things for newer players. Like,
and bans always do that, right?
Yeah.
But it gets worse when, like, it's specifically with these pre-constructed products.
Right. And so the last thing I want to bring up is, why did KO, of all heroes, get this deck? And not a hero that, like, actually needs the support. And we see that Bolton really needed the support. So, like, what is the cost-benefit analysis of, like, choosing an objectively really strong deck and giving it more shit to terrorize the meta with?
See, I feel like KO makes perfect sense to print. If I want somebody to get into the classic constructed format, I want to give them a good deck. And KO's a good hero right now. I feel like they should be printing precons for the good heroes to get them people into the game. I think the buffing, quote unquote, of KO is really more of a side effect of what this product should be doing. And again, leads into our like conversation about, like, does this actually help the product to have these new strong cards printed for the hero, you know? I also, that's partly why I was expecting a couple more, like, staples. Like, Blood Rush Bellows is not that expensive right now. I feel like this deck could have Blood Rush Bellows, you know? But I would expect other heroes in the future to be meta viable heroes.
So I will say that, like, one thing that LSS kind of did with heavy hitters is that it seems like they printed 3 heroes intending them to be good and 3 heroes intending them to not be as good in terms of stepping into Classic Constructed. I know that in the talk at PTLA, Brian Go kind of said, if you play heavy hitters and you really like playing warrior, there's Kasai, right? In response to, like, why didn't Olympia get things when Olympia came out? And it's like, look, dude, there's Kasai. Kasai is the good warrior. Don't, like, there's the strong one. There's the one that you can go take and win a bunch with.
See, that would be another good armory deck pick, right?
Right.
Specifically because she doesn't need buffs, quote unquote. She is a strong deck that can compete in this format. You can even play a weaker version of that hero and still scrape by.
Yeah. I think if you also... I think KO was a choice made during development of heavy hitters. And they didn't quite know what would happen in the meta. I don't think they expected KO to have 400 points right now. I think they expected people to figure out KO and start beating KO. And that didn't really happen.
Yeah.
And because if you look at Kasai and Victor, both of them got about 200 points. And if you think about them living legending, that means that they have 5 full Pro Tour seasons, right? That's a lot. That's like actually like 2 years of play.
Yeah.
So if you think that they expect 200 points per season, okay, they're going to be around for like 2 years. That's a wonderful thing to print in an armory deck. But the fact that KO doubled that I think they weren't quite expecting it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like I love trying to figure out like how far in development are all these products, all these sets in. Because LSS has spoiled like a few sets like next year, and it seems like some of the elements of heavy hitters seemed like really last minute. So I think they're still figuring out like at what threshold they should have stuff figured out and like how soon they should be releasing this stuff. And I get the argument, like you want to give good decks to newer players so that they have some type of foothold in the meta, because no one wants to get farmed by playing a shit hero. But to your point, Clark, like it would make more sense if Olympia, Betsy, and Rhinar each got an armory deck, specifically because they did Rhinar so fucking dirty in the classic battles. Betsy is pretty much the tertiary guardian until both the other guardians LL, and Olympia until recently had one specialization being a hat and pretty much nothing else going for it.
He had up the ante, but yes.
Oh yeah, up the ante, sorry. But those two specs I feel like didn't carve out enough of an identity for his portion of the warrior class.
100%.
And so these armory decks just, I think KO had enough going for him where he didn't need this, and there were a bunch of other heroes that were as strong or could be stronger if they got the support like this. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah. I think they should have seen KO being stronger than maybe they first thought he was going to be.
I mean, as much as we've complained about blue sixes and they've been afraid of blue sixes, like creating a hero with only blue sixes would be strong, but that's how it goes.
Yeah.
That's all I got for Yellow Pitch. I think now I would love to hear like what we think would be best for future releases. Clark, why don't you take it away for our Blue Pitch?
Yeah. So I got our Blue Pitch, and what we always like to do with our Blue Pitch is talk about the future, look forward, step into tomorrow with shiny eyes and a heart full of hope. And I think we can certainly do that, because I think product releases, especially unique product releases, is really where LSS can distinguish themselves from the TCG market.
True.
I think that Magic is like, look, we got Commander decks and we got Pioneer decks, and that's kind of all we need. And I think that looking at Round the Table, like that was just so different than anything I've really seen before. And I think looking at Armory decks, that's maybe a bit more common what I've seen out of other TCGs.
Right.
But I think they can do some real special things. So I really want to talk about how LSS is able to create products that will really set them apart. And I think that they can, because I think they have a development team who has the ideas and the drive to make it happen. So first off, I think they learn more than any other TCG on the market right now.
Yes, they do.
LSS is constantly learning and adapting and growing. Like every single time, I've now been in the community very actively for, I'd want to say, about a year now.
Sure.
And I pretty much everything that people were complaining about when I first came in, I have seen them do something to fix. And so I want to talk about a couple of these things. First, star ratings for difficulty on the Blitz starter decks. And packaging the Blitz starter decks together. That is actually something I really, really love that they're doing in Mistvale. And that means that you can try out all three of the different playstyles.
Oh, wow. I haven't thought of it like that. It's like a Neapolitan sundae.
Yeah. it's Neapolitan mystic. I think that's awesome. I think that's a really great lesson learned, because typically what people would do is like just buy one, and then they'd play their friend who'd maybe buy one from a different set. I'd tell a story about another time at Kingslayer where some new players were looking to buy starter decks, and I encouraged them to try to buy from the same set, because then it made it easy. They were like, well, how can we upgrade these? And I was like, well, you can always just buy a single box, and if you and your friends are into different heroes or different classes, then when you open the packs, the chaff that you don't need for your hero, you can give to them.
Oh. That's kind of cool.
So it's a really nice way of kind of giving everybody a little bit of something if you're trying to get into it as a group, right? You can get a couple friends together, buy all the Blitz decks, try them out. Oh, you like Warrior better, I like Guardian better. Let's buy a box. Each of us pay like $40 for the box. And then as we open it, everything that says Guardian will go to me and everything that says Warrior will go to you.
Yeah, that seems cool.
I'd love to see an evolution of this product that you're mentioning, where these 3 Blitz decks also include like 3 packs for each.
This one does. I'm looking at the Blitz deck collection now. It comes with 3 booster packs.
There we go, bro. Oh, wow. LSS, like,
and a mat.
They're cooking.
And
a mat.
And a mat. They are constantly learning and improving. They're listening to feedback and they're always making their products better. The star ratings for difficulty, I think, also really, really helps. A lot of new players would kind of stare at them and go, which one should I buy? I don't know. And I would have to tell them, don't buy the Bolton deck.
Now they know because it has like 16 stars on there.
And now they know. So there's more embedded information so that they can make the informed decision as a consumer rather than having to seek out that information. Makes it a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier for them to make that purchase.
That's crucial too, because like if they go to the shop on a day that isn't having Flesh and Blood, they can still find what they need to look for.
Yeah, even if like the person at that shop who's like the big Flesh and Blood person isn't there.
Right, that's huge too.
I also want to point out that like Round the Table, I think, showed them how printing good new cards can be very well received, right? Even cards that don't really have a big big dollar sign attached to them, like Earthlore Empowerment, got really positive reviews. Hey, you printed a brand new card that was interesting and I want to do stuff with outside of these decks. Hey, we got a lot of positive feedback. Let's try doing that with Run Roughshod. It just works. Like, it makes a lot of sense, and I think they've been doing a great job of that.
For sure.
So they're learning a lot. And so now I kind of want to open up, based off of sort of what we've seen in the lessons that they're learning, what heroes do you guys see getting an Armory deck? Either we still have one more coming out this year, but then even next year, what do you guys think they will be printing?
Oh, interesting.
I think Fi would be a great one, although he hasn't really been super highlighted. Other than winning the world championships, that's the only thing we've heard from Fi in a while.
And I want to highlight one of our good friends in local, Del Taco. I think he still has like a counter of how many days it's been since there's a Draconic Ninja card printed. And I think he's due for quite a bit of them. You know what I mean? As strong as he is objectively as a hero, it would be cool to see him as an Armory deck. But what I really want to see is a Armory deck that introduces like a Blitz only hero as an adult. I think that would be a really cool kind of product release.
I've seen a lot of people buzzing about the potential of printing a new hero in these Armory decks.
Yeah.
But I also see like, and you're probably going to bring it up right now, Clark, like the issues of creating not only new cards, but a new archetype and hero without the tokens, without being draftable, without interacting with other,
As long as it is printed alongside somewhere else to get that token. Because if I need a fucking token card to play a new hero, I will lose my absolute shit if I need to spend $50 on that. $40 to $50. I will go buck wild.
So maybe that's a meme answer, but legitimately, I think Asai, because I think a lot of her play style suffers in her weak accumulation of copper, unless you add like 9 or 12 cards, which seems like a lot for to even play a specialization that she had when she was a Blitz only hero. So I think a little bit of support in that arena would be beneficial and would carve out a little bit more of her identity compared to like Dorinthia or Olympia.
So I want to call back to a point you made in Yellow Pitch. Why would that work better in a pre-constructed product rather than the expansion slot? Or in, say, a supplemental set release? Why does it work better in a product?
Is that a trick question?
No.
Oh.
It's me asking, like, I really want us to try to think about, like, why a product, right? Why should this be packaged separately? Why shouldn't this come in a box? Or, sorry, not a box, but why shouldn't this come with a set, right? Why take this other route?
I think for the most part, a lot of everything that we can see in an armory deck could be printed in an expansion slot, but I think an injection of power to heroes between sets is a good way to shake up a meta, because Flesh and Blood and LSS, they don't release as many products as Magic the Gathering, maybe not even a third of what they release. So metas can get really stale, and sometimes sets don't even impact the meta all that much. So if we give power to decks that are decently strong but still need a little bit of help, could help the meta share, and could, I mean, it could also be included in the set at a later time, much like you said in Yellow Pitch.
Yeah.
That was a good answer. I was just going to say that I'm also asking Clark's question, but when I ask it, it is a trick question.
Got it.
I can't say that now.
I would say this. If like we didn't know that Zen was coming out, I would say Crouching Tiger Katsu would be the perfect thing to print in an armory deck.
Yes.
Because it needs an archetype to flesh out. And I think if a new player like buys a supplemental set, they don't quite see how the deck should put together. If it came in a constructed format with like a limited and draft, they could go do a draft, they could go do a sealed, and they can see what those starter decks look like.
Right.
They can already see how the deck is supposed to function. But I know that when I first saw the Crouching Tiger stuff in Dynasty, I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with these?
Yeah.
I didn't actually realize I could discard Crouching Tigers that were made in hand to Katsu's ability till Fuzzy mentioned it like a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
That's
Dynasty was like the first set that I like really opened. I never realized it.
Yeah.
And new players would definitely feel that way. So I think taking some of those maybe more forgotten, set aside alternate archetypes for heroes, those alternate play styles, bring them into the forefront with an armory deck and give them an idea of how to play around it. Bonus points if you're going to support it later.
That's a fantastic idea. I didn't even think about that, because if you analyze where the Crouching Tiger line came from, it was a supplemental set and another supplemental set, or like a separate product itself. So, in that same vein, you could also do a Leviathan structure deck with, Hexagore being the main, would be the main strategy, or Olympia with Axes, or whoever the Axe hero is going to be. You know what I mean? Like, there's limitless, or not limitless. There's a bunch of cards that I can see that need a home within their class. And so these armory decks would be a really, really great way to approach that. Great point, Clark.
I think these ideas are a little too awesome.
Yeah.
I'm still really skeptical that printing new cards and new support in any way is something that's healthy for the game in these pre-constructed decks. And I know that's the negative Nancy opinion. I don't think it's a fun opinion, but I mean, even just the little cards that Kayo got, imagine a whole new strategy being created. Imagine if it's a good, competitively viable one. Now you really need these armory decks just to be able to play that type of game, At least I can play KO right now. I just don't have to run Savage Sash. It's not like it's core to KO strategy.
Right.
But these other strategies, they would be, it sounds like.
Yes, and that is a possible crux, but again, it's all about lessons and learning, trying, failing, and adapting afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do want to now bring up my nice big bolded part in my notes here, which is friends, colleagues, listeners, we're thinking too small. Pre-constructed decks? Basic bitch shit. We can do better. We can be better. You can't see. I'm doing the politician fist with like my thumb on top.
The Obama
We
one.
can be better.
The Obama thumb. He's doing the Obama thumb,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. You can Google it.
PvE. PvE should be a product release. It shouldn't come in a set. It shouldn't be some rule set thing that they just like put out an article on fabtcg.com. This should be like $100 big box board game set that you can put in LGSs around the world.
Like Gloomhaven.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly like that. That is what the PvE mode can be. And I think it's a great way of doing it. Because PvE by nature is not really competitive. If you're playing, you're kind of winning. That's kind of the point of it, right? You can struggle and you can lose, but like, it's not like another person is losing, right?
Sure.
It's not like one person has to win and another person has to lose. That's actually really great because that can attract a new type of player. And we've talked about how pre-constructed products are incredible for bringing in new players. In fact, they're kind of the ideal way to do it. I remember Legends of Runeterra was a game that I used to play a lot of. And our executive producer, Talon, used to play a lot of. Fuzzy used to play a good amount of it too. Mm-hmm. Talon really liked playing against other players, and I didn't. For some reason, with Legends of Runeterra, I really enjoyed their PvE mode. So
it's a great PvE mode.
It's all I would play, honestly.
I took a lot of inspiration from it as we were developing the roguelike on Talishar. Mm-hmm. I don't just mean it makes it sound like it was my idea. Everybody who was helping with the roguelike on Talishar really loved Path of Champions from Legends of Runeterra, and it was something that we would talk about frequently when we're trying to develop our own PvE mode online.
Yes. So I think it attracts a brand new type of player, and once you have them playing the PvE mode and playing with Flesh and Blood cards, eventually they're going to want to upgrade those decks, because when it's pre-constructed, you can't add new cards to that pool. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have to go buy the new set that comes out. They're going to have to order some singles so that they can start tailoring their PvE experience. And so it engages them with future product releases, rather than taking enfranchised players that already play Flesh and Blood and like giving them another reason to play the game. You're bringing in outside players into the main enfranchised team.
I want to play this so bad. This mythical product that you're talking about, Clark, sounds dope.
It's also a safe way to play the game, right? You can have a friend come over and like walk you through the rules and like play it along with you, right? We're on a team. We're not fighting each other. We don't have to fight each other. Oh, here, this card can work like this. Let me see what's in your hand.
For sure.
These are things that are normally very difficult to do in Flesh and Blood, because it's like, well, I'm not supposed to know what you have in your hand, but to help you do your turn, why don't you like show me your hand and I'll show you? No, none of that anymore. It's literally like we are supposed to be looking at each other's hands and helping each other. It is so well set up for an enfranchised player to help a less enfranchised player.
So true.
And finally, multiple classes and lots of rules interactions. PvE is kind of built, at least the ones that I've seen, are built around finding new wacky rules interactions.
Right,
and like doing big extravagant things. If you are designing that into the board game, Fuzzy, harkening back to Red Pitch, learning opportunities. PvE would provide lots of learning opportunities that they could then take into the 1v1 game modes at Armories. I feel very strongly about PvE being very, very good as a product release rather than like just a new rule set thing.
And I think you're doing a good job of getting me passionate about it too, because typically like multiplayer card, like, I mean, Commander's cool, but like UPF did not interest me at all. This PvE, like what PvE could be, is very, very exciting. And I love how you're attaching it to how it can improve classic constructed play as well, because I think you always have to cater to classic constructed since it's the most popular format. It's like the official, like, you know.
I mean, certainly some of the cards are obviously going to be good in classic constructed. But also just like, it would also just be great for UPF, because they would want to probably print brand new mechanics in the set.
Yep.
Specifically for like helping allied players.
Yeah.
Or like assisting people. And then that's going to be great in UPF. And like, it's just going to flesh out that side of the game so much more. And it's going to take disenfranchised players and it's going to make them enfranchised players.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I feel good. Then let's go ahead and close the page of the book on Blue Pitch and move on to our Arsenal Zone.
Listeners, our Arsenal Zone is where we each shout out a card that we've been thinking about lately, something on our minds. It can be any card in the game. And I would like to start us off with Rejuvenate from Tales of Aria.
Oh my god, you fucker. You actual fucker.
So we were playing a Tales of Aria draft this weekend, and we were doing it a little bit wacky where it was a 6-man pod with 4 packs of each player. So you can get really specific with your strategies. And I was like, how can I make Rejuvenate playable? Like a 1 cost that gains me 3 life. It's an instant if I fuse on that turn. So I'm like, okay, what like 2 cost fuses are there, right? That would be the goal, right? So like in Twine Earth, I was playing Oldhim. So in Twine Earth, Fuse and then Rejuvenate seemed like an amazing play. I was trying to like draft in a way that makes that happen.
Turn Timber.
Yeah, the defense reaction. I had one blue Turn Timber, but I was hoping on that dream. I tried to pitch stack it to make it work where I could like pitch, Fuse, Rejuvenate. Didn't quite happen, but that's okay. I was playing a game against Joel where I played 2 red Rejuvenates and 1 yellow Rejuvenate in the same game.
You guys can't see it. Joel is so angry right now.
I still got him a 1, by the way. He get 8
But then I went to
life.
4.
Oh yeah, then he went to 4. Yeah, that was nice.
And it was like this like grindy fatigue game too. Like both of us are playing Oldhim, and I could see Joel was playing fatigue, you know? He's like block, earth react.
No, I was not.
You were just like, he was playing defensively, swinging with hammer. I'm like, I have to be
Because
conscious
I was
of
forced to. I want to. He
You
went.
could have just taken damage.
He went second, bro. There's no. Stop. I will not have this slander.
So my Rejuvenates really came in handy, and I feel like I was able to live that dream a little bit. I was usually pitching an extra card just to play the Rejuvenate, but it worked out for me, and the card is fun, even if it's not very viable. And I brought a copy to sign for each of you.
Is this the copy you played against me?
It will be. Fuck. Yep, this is the one I played against you.
It is now.
Yeah.
1 for you, and 1 for you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Fuzzy.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go next. So if you haven't gone to an armory in the past month or so, the armory promos have been a mix of Slap Happy, Take It on the Chin, and Battered Not Broken.
Yeah.
And every single time I've prayed to every god I can think of for Take It on the Chin so I could have 3 copies for my warrior deck. And I keep getting fucking Slap Happy. And
just that stupid smug.
it's so stupid. Like the character on it's so dumb and derpy, and I didn't think it was good until today when I saw that the new D-React for Bolton and the new leg piece. And it got me thinking about some secret tech. It's not secret though, because Ellie, Yuki Lee's girlfriend, played to great success. I think at a PQ and played like 2 copies of Slap Happy. And I was thinking, if in this new build you're playing a bunch of yellows, you play Soulbound Resolve instead of Tunic, and you just play 3 of these, you basically get to block 6 damage, and instead of waiting 9 turns to get 3 uses out of Phoenix Spring Tunic, you get them immediately when you play it. So on the following turn, you can be the Vanguard, take flight, whatever cost 1 resource, which is so crucial. So
yeah, that's
painful.
really important for Bolton.
Yeah, it's really hard to work around. So you usually need Tunic. But if you play Slap Happy, you get these, extra block value and the Vigor token, as well as being able to play Soulbound Resolve, so you can charge like your Speed of Arena, maybe your Light of Soul or another non-block, and get some more defensive value as compared to Phantom Spring Tunic. So I really like Slap Happy now. But yeah, that's my card. I wanted to talk about it because I had a really like quick 180 on that stupid card.
Can you read the text?
Yes. So Slap Happy is a 0-cost Guardian Warrior instant. It's an instant, so it doesn't block. At red, it's rare locked. And you prevent 2 damage. If you do, you create a Vigor token. And usually you'd play only Take It on the Chin so you can get Go Again. But Bolton doesn't really struggle with Go Again as much anymore, and much less so than the other 3 warriors. He mostly struggles on resources, so that's why I thought this card would be an interesting inclusion, mostly because I've already seen it done well, or perform well. So yeah.
Nice. For my card, I'm talking about Command and Conquer. Because Command and Conquer's a bitch-ass motherfucker, and I don't think you need it in your deck.
I think Command and Conquer is very strong, but also
Wild take.
No, I think it's a
slightly
bait.
overrated.
I think it's a bait.
Slightly
Command and
overrated.
Conquer's a bait.
Wild take.
Quote me. Quote me, motherfuckers.
Is this your way of saying you're trying to get into Ranger?
This is my...
It's a psyop.
Yeah, Clark's joining Talon on the Riptide cult.
Oh no.
No. I just found myself, like, in Brute specifically, where, like, we love 2 for 6s, and I'm just cutting Command and Conquer a lot of the time because, like, I don't really need it. And I don't think a lot of decks actually need it. I think Command and Conquer used to be an automatic include in so many decks, and I think that is a heuristic that we need to start fighting against. I think you really need to think about, what is Command and Conquer doing in my list? How does it fit my cost curve? How can I use it to its fullest extent, right? If you're running Findalls and you run Pummel, okay, CNC is very good in your list. So Bravos are fine. If you are KO, right, and you're like making the Might to give it a 7 power breakpoint that normally they would cover with a D-React, but you don't have D-Reacts anymore. That's great. Or CNC makes a lot of sense now.
Or like a Cast Bones for 12 go again.
Sure. But now, like, why would Azalea run it? Why would so many heroes run it? Like, it's in a ton of deck lists, but I'm really wondering just how often are you actually getting, like, how often is it actually hitting and getting value and doing the things that it's supposed to be doing in the list? And I think it's less than people actually think about. I think if you actually sit down and think about the last time that you played CNC and you were like, damn, playing CNC was a great play there. In a lot of decks, I don't think it's as often as you think.
So my gut reaction is to boo you off the stage, but now I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking specifically in terms of like popper density of decks, and I think we're getting access to really good poppers. Like,
it used to just be the popper,
right,
the good generic popper that could also like find a good place to be played.
It's basically a sideboard card.
Yeah,
it is like a main deckable, main boardable sideboard card because it's a strong on hit that's going to be relevant to almost every game of Flesh and Blood that you
destroy
play.
Arsenal. Everyone's probably going to put something in Arsenal at some point.
But there are certain matchups where you just need 6 power cards. It's like the best one, or you need to be able to destroy their arsenal, or you need to stop them from having 5 card hands.
Yeah.
But other than those reasons, it's not that good.
But I do love the versatility of it, and I also love that we're getting more cards, so we're actually considering whether or not we actually need CNC in our deck.
Yeah,
interesting.
We're going to bring the price of CNC down by making it irrelevant. We're starting the PSYOP. Guys, we are actually small enough that we could actually do a PSYOP. Listeners, get with me on this. Just start tweeting, like, when was the last time CNC even did anything? We can do this. We can change the price of CNC.
Oh my god.
I'm drafting the tweet right now from our official Pitch It To Me podcast account.
All right, and I think that's all we got for you.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye. Join the Discord. Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Joel Recinos, Clark Moore, and Fuzzy Delp. Our executive producer is Talon Stradley. Music is produced by Dillon Hulse. Logo is designed by Han V. And our sound mixing is done by Christopher Moore. Last but not least, thank you, the listener, for taking the time to listen to our podcast. Be sure to give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me Podcast.
I saw a headline that said Ulysses Grant great-grandson writes gay vampire fanfiction.
Yes! That is the American dream.
And somebody posted that quote. They were like, I studied war so my sons could study commerce, so their son could study art, so their son could write gay vampire fanfiction.
That's a fucking outtake. I'll tell you what.